The reason being new kind of has a connotation that it's getting better. And it's not necessarily getting better. It's not also necessarily getting worse. But it has changed. And it's changed in quite drastic ways. So if I can just start by outlining the problems that China had, the solutions that they brought, the new problems that they have now, and what the new solutions are going to be. And I'll actually end with how this all makes sense to us here in Thailand, and especially in Isan. China had this kind of vicious cycle of, in order to create GDP, they had to build capacity. In order to build capacity, they had to build infrastructure. For infrastructure needed capacity, capacity needed debt. China went very quickly from using $1 of debt to create $1 of GDP about 20 years ago, to about 5 years ago where it took about $4 of debt to create $1 of GDP. And so basically the economic machine was no longer responding as well as it used to the accumulation of debt. How did they get rid of this? Well, try to get rid of this cycle. They went towards basically what I call the 4 Ds: deleverage, decost, decapacity, deleverage, and destock. So effectively, the deleverage is deleveraging the banks, which are already at about 300% of GDP, total credit all included, out of the system, which is very high. It's about the same as the US. Only China has twice the cost of capital as the US. So everyone's going, yeah, they have like $3 trillion worth of reserves. Yeah, but that's like a few months worth of interest, you know. You burn through that very quickly. So they tried this, they decapacitated, which was very instrumental, and you know, one of the reasons why it really is important to us out here in Asia to know what's going on in China is because that had a very direct impact on the prices of everything: steel, coal. You know, so China is important in that it moves even if you don't need to deal. You think you don't need to deal with China. Well, what China does is going to deal with you. So they did these 4 Ds, and it really led to that big uptick in commodity prices 5 years ago. They managed more or less to hold the debt still. They also did BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, which was their way of principally exporting capacity. Well, actually, I would say they were exporting capabilities first, capacity second, and thirdly, if they could get some influence along the way, even better. Right? And finally, you know, innovation was a huge angle of the first round of changes, because they required innovation in order to keep themselves competitive. They did that for a while. It didn't work. Everyone came down on them. The West was like, you're stealing our technology. You know, BRI is like you're bankrupting countries, so they were okay, we're gonna like figure it out. Fix number 2, which is about a couple of years ago. So no longer BRI, we now talk about dual circulation, which in Chinese, interestingly, is actually read as 内循环, which is internal circulation, not dual. You know, in the English translation, they stress on the dual aspect of it. In Chinese, it's very clearly internal circulation, i.e., let's just focus on ourselves. Right? They also came out with these new kind of catchphrases and initiatives called common prosperity, which actually the Chinese have been doing for a long time already. They have founding as a children's project in a very rural area of China, right on the Myanmar border. Borders on the one side, Shan State, and on the left, borders Kachin, so it's very poor, lots of drugs. You have a lot of AIDS, lots of orphans, and you know, we've been going back to the same villages for 15 years. And we can see how that prosperity has been trickling down to the villages over the last 20 years, which, by the way, is why the government continues, and this party continues to have a lot of strong support from every level because there is this trickle-down effect. Finally, they're trying to promote consumption. Now that was all fine. Fixed 2.0 worked until kind of around about now. So we still have the old problem, this vicious cycle. But then we also have the trade war we have to deal with, COVID, which China is kind of figuring its way out of. It's going to do 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 3 steps back for another while. But it's still figuring its way out of that. We have a real estate crisis on one's hand now, which is very worrying because the real estate sector is so important to the economy of China. In fact, it's so important that it's surprising that they don't have better regulation over it. It's kind of completely Wild West. Anyhow, they were trying to rein that in. It didn't work. Basically killed the sector, which is, supports about 40 to 50 different subsectors. Is maybe a third of banking credit, and about 70 to 80% of the savings of your average Chinese. And we have Ukraine, which is problematic on many levels. So old problems still there, new problems require fixes. So where is China headed? We actually have isolation, and we see that I was, for the most part of COVID, in China, and I could, a lot of, every week we'd see people leaving, every week we'd see schools closing, businesses closing. People who had been in China for 15 years were now packing their bags and leaving. So something was happening in the last few years, and understandably, because we had, the government, they've let certain people in, so the people who have work there, they'll let them in, won't let their wives in, won't let their children in. So that's not tenable. You're not gonna, you can do that for 3 months, not 3 years. So, and geopolitically, since Trump started this very active trade war with China in 2017, there's this impression that, okay, it's US-China. But actually, it's not really US-China. And the first here, you can see, actually, it's really the top 10 countries versus China, right? Because there is this kind of encirclement of China. There are also the various different pacts. Sorry, this one went off. This is AUKUS. You have NATO. You have the Quad, right? Yeah, basically you have Russia and China. And Russia, by the way, is not a very comfortable partner for China. The Chinese have never been particularly comfortable with the Russians and vice versa. So it's a very kind of brittle partnership. And actually you have now with Ukraine, you have a great alignment between Russia and India. There's also a point of technological isolation. Like, one of the great advantages of China was that they were able to create their own ecosystem years ago. So, the Google of China, is Baidu. WhatsApp of China, WeChat. The Facebook is Weibo. PayPal is Alipay. Amazon is Taobao and Kinmao and JD and all those guys. So they have their own, which is not the case in India, another billion-person market, which didn't create their own ecosystem. But one of the problems with this ecosystem is that because it's isolated, it actually isolates you. The fact that you have your own ecosystem. So right now, I had an idea to talk a couple of weeks ago to a group of China-focused kind of business people. Out of a room of 80, only 2 people have WeChat. So China's not, whatever message you want to get across, it's not getting across. Right? It's very hard, vice versa, for us to understand, on the outside, to understand what's going on in China. News outlets is completely separate, and there's actually a Chinese kind of firewall blocking that. And then, the fact that I mentioned earlier that people just aren't getting in and out of China very much. There are now only 60,000 Europeans, including Brits, all in everything from like Poland, Hungary, all the way to the UK. Only 60,000 left in the whole of China. As a comparison, there are 40,000 French living in Thailand. So I mentioned just now the strength of the Chinese initiative to innovate. At the heart of it is this, the fact that they have this kind of cycle of planning that they put into innovation, and you know, it's not it's directed by central government organizations. A lot of the innovation isn't necessarily done by them, it's often funded to some part, but there's a whole thing, there's research and teaching, sometimes 20 years in advance. The Chinese will fund something even though there's no clear view as to what they'll use it for. I like using an example of quantum computing. The Chinese, about 3-4 years ago, did the very first quantum entanglement between a land base and a satellite. It was done by this guy called Khon Kaen. He was given his research funding in 1997. Most research institutes in China at the time didn't even have personal computers. And then, at that time, they were already given the money to go and figure out how to do quantum. You have policy support, government support, you know, like they are now with EVs, with a lot of other, you know, they have this list of the research they're going to support, and they support it through government policy. Market is a huge market where they can use these technologies, assuming they're good. And finally, everything from angel investing to government grants to VCs, PEs, foreign investors, local investors, government investors, everything, all there. So that's really what drives it. And actually, you can see the result here is a very, you know, convincing growth in EV sales. And you know, EVs, China didn't have an exportable automobile industry, and yet now this is purely export. On the other hand, like you also have fundamental science growing because on the dotted line is the number of scientists returning from the US back to China. Now this is talk about BCG, so I wanted to mention this angle. The Chinese have, and this is, and we're feeling this in China. We're feeling it in Beijing every day. I wake up in the morning, I can actually breathe, as opposed to literally just 5 years ago where it was unlivable. And now we're actually seeing that, and it's not always necessarily a straight line. So the Ukraine war actually brought back a lot of thermal coal projects that were actually being shelved. But you know, you have on the one hand like energy security, but then they're working very, very strongly on transformation of the energy grid, and you have like on the innovation side, but also on the efficiency. So a lot of the innovation that you see in China is driven towards efficiency, and they have two goals. The 2030 goal, which is carbon peak, and there's a very detailed plan about how they're going to get there. 2060 goal about carbon neutrality. A little bit more vague, a little bit further out. They're going to have to invent something really good between now and then to easily reach the carbon neutrality by 2060. So, with all of this going on, we're feeling a big refocus from China onto ASEAN. Chinese investment, if you're going to try and get a Chinese investment overseas in general, it's very, very difficult. Unless it's ASEAN. ASEAN has a very we're in the soft spot. We're friendly enough, we're big enough, we're growing enough, and we're, you know, in need, complementary enough with the Chinese economy, both in terms of how we fit into the supply chain, but also what is it that we need that they have to offer. And you can see, this trading, we've overtaken everything between 2017 and now, right? And investment, you can see the East Asian investment is a big part of the pie. And if you added the West Asia as well, that's really half the pie. So we, sitting in Thailand, sitting in ASEAN, are the beneficiaries of Sino-US tensions. And finally, I wanted to mention a little bit about Isan. So Khon Kaen, first of all, is already, I mean, without even waiting for the new dual-track train between Bangkok and Beijing, sorry, Bangkok and Udon and Kai. We are already here now on our transportation for the area. There is already a train running. Actually, I saw it running just outside it. Right? It's not a very fast train. In fact, it's an incredibly slow train. But for the purposes of goods trades and goods, it's good enough. It's already working. And the Lao train, the China Lao train is already working now. So there is already today, we don't have to wait for the completion of the new track. The current infrastructure is already good enough, right? We also have the fact that any additional kind of, however good it is already now, there's that growth path towards how it will become once the new dual track is built. And so there are basically three areas. You know, the investment that will come along the way. There will be these corridors of prosperity that will be built up along these trade routes. And Khon Kaen is ideally positioned to benefit from that with China, and especially in terms of the agri-tech, which Chinese are very much interested in, and food security is one of the single biggest items at the top of the list for the Chinese. Tourism, they're not here now, they're going to come back. I hope the next time we get them back, we're going to do better than last time. We don't need 10 million tourists. We need 1 million good tourists. And if we can get those 1 million good tourists to go to new places, try out new hotels, try out new experiences, and get them back regularly, that's really what we need. In the past, of the 10 million tourists, I think 7 were only theoretically in Thailand. From the moment they stepped out of the plane to the moment they got back on the plane, there was not a single location they were at which was not owned by these travel tour agents and their friends. And another thing that the Thais do very well is actually, sustainability. You know how DJSI, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, there is one Chinese company in that list, okay, in the DJSI. That's probably one of the more reputable sustainability indexes in the world, the DJSI. One Chinese company there. There are 3 Singaporean companies in there. There are 13 Thai companies. Okay. We do this well. BCG. This is something that works for Thailand. It helps Thailand. It helps our neighbors. The Chinese look at it and they know they're weak in that. ESG is the weakest area of the Chinese corporates going forward. That is the thing that will actually not get them to become investable by blue chip American, European, and Japanese funds because they fail on the ESG side. We happen to be rather better at that. So there is a lot of scope for cooperation on that. There was 20 years ago on corporate governance, and there is again today on ESG related. So this is an incredibly exciting time. It is a different time. So all these ideas of what China was like 5 years ago, that's no longer the case. We think what China is. We think the way we engage with China, but there remains a lot of opportunities. Investment, and by the way, when I say investment, it's both ways. Chinese can come here. There is also, China has never been so cheap. In the 25 years that I've been working with China, I've never seen it so cheap, even including the Asian financial crisis. So there's a lot of this. you're not going to make money the same way you used to make, but there's still a lot of people working together as China. On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr.Joe Horn Founder for your valuable sharing. And for sharing, we see the big picture of how China has changed